Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Welcome back to the Savvy Dentist Podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. It's Jesse Green here at the control panels, and today we have an action-packed conversation about culture. My guest today is Collin Ellis, and we're going to be talking about how to create a winning culture in your practice. What Colin shares in this episode is absolutely practical, how-to, hands-on, get-it-done kind of information. This is not academic theory. This is practical stuff that you can take notes about and implement in your practice today. I'm going to encourage you to have a pen and paper handy because you're not going to want to miss a single moment of this episode. It's an absolute cracker. Now, as a community service announcement, I want to share with you a resource that we've created called Earn More, Work Less. It's a series of 20 videos. It's pro tips that we've created by looking at all the things that work really well in rapid growth practices, and we've condensed that into 20 videos, and we deliver those tips each day in your inbox over the period of a couple of weeks. I'm going to encourage you to download it. There's tons of good information in there, and there's 100% complimentary. And you can get it by going across to savvydentist.com and getting access through that way. It's an absolute cracker. We've put a ton of work into it for you, and I really hope you find that helpful. But for now, let's get into our conversation with Collin Ellis. I know you're going to love this. Here it is. Thank you so much for taking the time. How are you, mate?
Mate, I'm really good. Thanks for having me on.
Been looking forward to it, actually. And being an Englishman, we were just talking a little moment ago off air. It's a balmy 11 degrees in Melbourne, and you're ready to get into your shorts and singlet and go for a bit of a stroll down Melbourne streets. It's balmy weather.
As soon as anyone sees anybody in shorts, especially with my white legs, they're like, he's English. That guy there, he's English.
He's English. Well, the English have got a lot to celebrate at the moment. They've just had Wimbledon. They've just won the World Cup cricket. So it's a good day to be an Englishman, mate.
Just for today, it's a good day, mate. Yeah, it's always great when England win one trophy because we know we can dine out on it for the next 50 years. So I got that to look forward to.
Well, enjoy that. Colin, you're really well known for lots of things, particularly around projects and culture. And today we want to really hone our conversation around culture. And the work that we do with dentists is really about helping them create a business that scales, that's got some leverage in there so that the business owner is running a true business rather than being self-employed. And of course, at the heart of that is the business owner's role of creating a great team. And we all hear the word culture. We all know that it's a good thing to have. We all hear the buzzwords. But I wondered if you could just dissect out for a moment. Let's strip away the hyperbole, strip away the buzzwords. Can you define for me what culture actually really is? Because I think we hear about it all the time. We assume that we know, but I'm not sure that we're always right.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It is that. It's just one of those things that we're like, oh yeah, it's the most important thing. What is it? Well, it's the way we do things. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, it is the way we do things. But culture is the sum of everyone's attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, traditions, and skills. So culture really belongs to everyone within an organization. So if you take a dental practice, it doesn't belong to the kind of owner of the business. It belongs to everybody that works in and around that. And obviously it's driven by the feedback from the customers too. So it's the sum of everybody.
It's a really interesting thing because as business owners, we always feel the responsibility to set the culture, if I could use my air quotes, which no one will see because it's a podcast. But of course, if it's owned and created by the whole team, how then does culture kind of get created with a specific intent? Because my experience, certainly when I first started in business, it was a little bit by default rather than by design. And I think most businesses operate that way. We've had to go about being specific in our intention around that. But why is it you think that people have it by default? And then how do you put some specificity into it? How do you bring it to life?
Yeah, so we've got this thing in our heads, Jesse, that culture change is hard. And so, we're already coming into this thing with a fixed mindset as it is. And so what we end up doing is telling ourselves, and as a permanent employee myself, I was 30 years, there's only one organization that ever was deliberate about culture. And funnily enough, that was the one that had the most success, is we just let it evolve. We just let it co-create itself. And we kind of keep our fingers crossed that everything will work. And then every now and again, things don't work. So we do the classic, let's have a team building day where we take everybody off site and we're like, oh yeah, that was a whole heap of fun. And then we expect that to change everything. And whilst it may create some, I guess, short-term gains, it doesn't create any long-term kind of effect. And so we really do have to be, if we want a great culture, and obviously that's where we get great results, is we really have to be deliberate about it. And we have to start with understanding kind of the personality of the people and how we talk to each other before then doing some kind of set exercises, right? What's our vision? What are our goals? What are some core values that we have? And then crucially, how do we behave? How do we work together? And how do we make time for new thinking? And all of that sounds hard, Jesse. So then what we do is just kind of keep our fingers crossed and hope that it sorts itself out.
I think a lot of people adopt the emu approach or the ostrich approach and bury their head in the sand and hope that it's just going to be all right by the time they pull their head up and go, oh, amazing, it's all fixed itself. Great, nothing to see here, move along. So it does sound hard. And I know that you've got a new book out coming out in November, which we'll dive into in a minute. But I think for people listening to this program, firstly, before we get into how to create a culture with intent, when you look at workplaces that have got a great culture versus those that have got a mediocre culture or even a poor culture, typically what do you see? Obviously, there's going to be the productivity elements. I'm assuming there'll be staff turnover, customer turnover. What do you see as the benefits of creating a great culture with specificity?
Oh, I mean, the benefits, they're all the way through. I mean, Gallup produced a survey in 2017, Jesse, and in it, they talked about the benefit of what I would call vibrant cultures, which is where we decide to co-create something great. So you get an increase in productivity, an increase in this thing called engagement. You get longer serving employees, but you also get things like fewer safety incidents and greater customer loyalty. So culture exists outside of what kind of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And so in our recommendation heavy world, I mean, most things we do today is based on the recommendation of someone else. It never used to be like that. 20 years ago, when I was talking about this not so long ago, we would book a holiday based on what was cheapest or what sounded best. Now, when we're going to book a holiday, let's say you're going to Byron, you might be like, oh, have you been to Byron? Where's good? Where did you stay? And it's exactly the same with all of our local services, doctors, dentists. Only recently we moved into a new place 2 years ago. The first thing I did with the neighbors is like, oh, where's a good dentist around here?
Yeah.
And the person they recommended was the experience that they had. And the experience that they had was based on the culture within the practice and the service they received.
Yeah, fantastic. So there's benefits, as you say, all the way through. And I think from the business owner's perspective as well, part of those benefits extends to fulfillment and not just results and productivity, which of course is really massively important, but that fulfillment. And I can't remember who said it. I'm going to horribly misquote someone, I'm sure, but here we go. And there's a difference between success and fulfillment. And we want to make sure we've got both. And I think culture's got a role to play in both of those. But specifically thinking of fulfillment for the moment, there's a huge element to that as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the thing about fulfillment as well, Jesse, is that we get fulfillment when we're able to be the best version of ourselves, the best human that we can be, and also create this thing that people want to work in such that we can collectively achieve the results. We talk a lot when we have our best days is kind of when we were good humans and we smashed our job. Like literally, we had the best day. We did everything to everybody's satisfaction, and we were a good human as well. And that's where we get fulfillment. And you might not be earning $1 million a year. You might be earning some of my happiest days. I was on kind of no money at all back in the day as someone on a front counter serving customers at a bank. I was just a good human and got on well with my teammates, and we all put a shift in.
Yeah, that's very similar to my early days in the Navy as well. It was fantastic. We had a wonderful team. Certainly wasn't earning the most money as I have in my career either. And like you, it's about doing good work, being part of a team, making a difference, feeling like you're making a contribution. And it all really comes back to that culture, which, again, we think we know, but I suspect we've got a little bit of work to do there.
We do have a lot of work. And, you mentioned the book earlier. The reason that I wrote the book is as a manager myself for 20 years of kind of small and then really large teams, there was no book.
Nah.
No manual on how to do it. It's like I said at the start, it's just an assumption that's made that because you're a manager, you know how to do it. And so I always had this level of frustration. And so what I ended up doing, much like every other manager, was bring in a firm of consultants. bring in someone to help me do it, which runs counter to what you're actually trying to do, because you bring in someone external in to tell you how to do something that doesn't even belong to them.
Yeah.
So it just creates more ructions.
Well, it's imposed culture, isn't it, rather than created culture. And
yeah, that's right.
In your book, it's called Culture Fix, How to Create a Great Place to Work, which is coming out in November, which I think everyone listening to this podcast, bookmark November and make sure you head across to Colin's website, colindellis.com, and order yourself a copy, because I think you can't spend enough time getting this right. There's literally no way you can overinvest in culture, in my view, and I think the fruits will be there for you. So let's talk a bit about the book, because it is a how-to book, and you've spoken earlier about what culture actually is. And I guess there'll be people listening going, look, it sounds amazing, it sounds wonderful, but you mentioned, Colin, you wanted a manual, and everyone's going, yeah, me too. So what are the steps that one would go through to create a culture?
I think the first thing that everyone's got to do is to let go of this kind of notion that it's theirs and they own it. Too often I hear either individual business owners or CEOs of large organizations talking about culture as if it's theirs and they own it. And they don't. So the first thing is I always say is just let go and understand that even though it might be your business, it's not your culture. You're part of it. The kind of interesting thing, Jesse, is I tell people that you don't own it, and yet by their behaviors or their action or their inaction, they have the power to destroy it. So it's kind of not fair, but it's got to suck that up early on. So yeah, it's not theirs. Let go of that. And and then the way into any culture, it doesn't matter where it is. You could be going into a shop to buy a jacket, is through the personality of the people and the interactions between them.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, I run workshops, of course I do, and it's for over a couple of days. And the first thing that we do is spend some time getting to know each other. And I do a little simple personality survey. I think often personality surveys are a bit overly complex, and the exercises fail to achieve what they set out to do, because you don't talk about the real stuff, which is the second thing, is to sort of say, well, how collectively do we want to achieve our goals? What's our vision? So I've kind of got 6 pillars, and the first one is all around communication and personality. And then it's about setting that vision, and something that's just a little bit out of reach. Jesse, it's not generic. It's something it's not a goal. It's focused on kind of where you want for your listeners is where do you want your practice to be in a year? Because you should refresh your culture every year, every 12 to 18 months. It should never stay the same. And you should always be aiming to hit that vision.
Fantastic. So when we talk about vision as well, not being a goal, I think that's really important, because invariably most dentists I know are fairly analytical. And so we tend to think goals very easily, very clearly, and vision is not a goal. So could you give us some examples of a vision that might be compelling for someone? Because obviously we want it to be exciting and interesting. Otherwise, it's a bit of a ho-hum exercise. So what sort of, I don't know if you can disclose information, but what sort of companies have you worked with where they've really nailed that vision piece, just so that the audience here can get an idea of what a good one looks like?
Well, yeah. So there's lots of great examples, Jesse, and it's got to be obviously relevant to the particular practice or whatever. Some of the ones that I like out there in the business world. So New Zealand Rugby have got a good one. Theirs is inspiring and unifying New Zealanders, which is less about rugby and more about the role that rugby plays. And we know that rugby is huge in New Zealand. Lego is a great one, inventing the future of play. Just a little bit out of reach, because obviously there's lots more involved. Harley Davidson, they've got a cracker as well. We fulfill dreams of personal freedom.
Yeah, I love that.
So it's a real aspirational statement, and theirs is about personal freedom, not buying a bike. It's not about selling 1 million bikes in America, right?
Totally.
It's fulfilling dreams of personal freedom. But again, I mentioned in the book, and I talk about all the time, is no one teaches you how to do it. There's no exercise. There's an exercise in the book to help people create the vision statement. But instead, what we do is we fall back, and certainly for more detail focused businesses, is we fall back on a mission statement.
Yeah.
And instead we end up talking about what we do.
Yeah.
Rather than what's our aspiration.
Yeah, totally. And I have to say very candidly to the audience, and Colin, you'll smile as I say this, if I hear someone say, we provide state-of-the-art dentistry in a caring, comfortable environment, I'm going to vomit. Because that is not a vision.
It's not a vision. My other favorite one as well, Jesse, is to be the best dental practice in the world. Well, it's never going to happen.
No.
Never going to happen.
No.
It's way too out there,
Yeah, yeah. So again, when it comes to setting that vision, I really like the examples you've given us. And I think, coming back to the Harley Davidson, I think that's why we see so many middle-aged men over 40 wanting to look tough in black leather, because it is about freedom and getting out on the open road. And as a middle-aged man myself, there is quite an appeal to that. And I can see why it's compelling, because people do buy into that vision. The customer, the team, everyone buys into that vision, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. And what happens then is you base a lot of your marketing off the back of that vision too. So that what you sell is not the service you provide, but your vision.
Yeah.
Because when people buy into your vision, you create loyalty.
Yeah.
And Simon Sinek, a very famous TED talk called Start With Why. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so it's kind of a similar thing. It's not always true. I bought a Samsung fridge. I didn't look into Samsung's vision. But certainly for more local services, I really want to find out what people are about and kind of want to be part of that. And so I think if you can sell your vision, you're more likely to create loyalty.
Hi everyone, I really hope you're enjoying this episode of the Savvy Dentist podcast and taking some great notes. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, or indeed if you've enjoyed other episodes, I want to take a moment to let you know about some free training that I'm offering. As many of you'll know, for the past 25 years, I've not only run several practices myself, but I've also hosted elite masterminds and provided exclusive coaching for other dentists. Bottom line is I've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't when it comes to running a dental practice, whether it's how to boost profitability, leverage your time, attract more patients, or build a high-performing team. So to help share that with you, I've put together a collection of my top 20 pro tips in a series of videos. Now, these videos are 100% complimentary. All you have to do to get access is to head across to savvydentist.com and enter your name and email, and I'll deliver a tip daily in your inbox for the next few weeks. So if you're ready to accelerate your results, you're not going to want to miss this. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, so we know that there's got to be some vision, and you spoke earlier about behaviors and habits and rituals and all those sorts of things. And of course, the All Blacks are very well known for their habits, their rituals, the sweep the sheds routine that I'm sure most of us are familiar with now in that great book, Legacy. What sort of behaviors, again, will probably vary from one business to the next, but do you see sometimes that there is a disconnect between behaviors and the vision? Do you see that happen?
Yeah, particularly where it's imposed. And so a lot of organizations, when they bring in external people to do it on their behalf, you get a massive disconnect. And what you end up with is a generic set of behaviors. There was a survey done, I think it was by the Financial Times in 2014, and they kind of found a standard 4 values that cultures had. Things like integrity, respect, communication. It's like, well, if you don't have any of them, well, why are you even in business? You're not going to hit any of your targets.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to values and then laterally behaviors, every business is different.
Of course.
Because some businesses will kind of demonstrate some behaviors more than others. And so when I work with teams, it very much put the focus on, well, what are the behaviors that this particular culture needs at this particular time in order to achieve your vision?
Mm.
And that's why it needs to change. For some, they may need courage. For some, they may need discipline. For some, and probably one for most of your listeners, empathy is key.
Mm.
Well, let's put ourselves in our customers' shoes. What are they actually looking for? What are their fears? And how do we overcome those? And so it will be different. And that's where, as a team of people, you need to say, okay, well, what behaviors do we need at this point in time in order to achieve that vision?
Yeah. So I really love that. And listening to you go through that, what behaviors do we need right now at this particular time, I think is great, because as you mentioned just a few minutes ago, that culture needs to be updated and reviewed regularly. It's not a set and forget, and it can evolve over time. So therefore the behaviors will evolve, and what gets us here may not necessarily be what gets us there. Is that fair enough?
That's absolutely right. And when our brain works in interesting ways when it comes to behavior. So, our prefrontal cortex, that's the bit that kind of processes anger and fear and aggression. What we need to do is turn that into a positive behavior that we outwardly project. And so kind of fundamentally understanding all of that, and then being able to apply it to where we are right now. And fear is a big one, particularly when a business is struggling. And where a business is struggling, you say, well, the behavior that we need now is different than when the business is succeeding.
Yeah.
And so what's the difference? And then how do we demonstrate that behavior? And so I think kind of identifying the behavior is one thing, but then understanding how you apply it is a whole other thing. And this is, when I walk around offices and when organizations bring me in, is when I see behaviors or visions on a wall, I start to worry. Because these are the things that we live. We don't laminate them. We live them. And if you're constantly having to remind people, then you're kind of not the job as well as you can do.
Well, and that actually speaks to a really good point, because typically as the business owner, they're thinking about process. How do I create this culture? I know that I've got to have a vision. I know we've got to talk about behaviors and values and all that other sort of stuff. How do you get buy-in to the culture if you're trying to recreate it or reshape it? Because sometimes people are pretty happy with the status quo. And so is there a process for getting buy-in and moving beyond that? What happens if there is no buy-in?
So it's really simple. The whole buy-in process is whenever we're involved in anything, Jesse. So whenever we get a say in the creation of something, we automatically buy in.
Yep.
Because we've had a say.
Of course.
We recognize that something is ours, it's not theirs, so we've had a say. And at the end of that particular process, we come to an agreement. And then we as a group then say, this is our agreement and we'll stick to it.
Yeah.
Once you do that, buy-in is automatic. This is why whenever I talk to people, it's like, oh, we've got no buy-in. I was like, okay, well, who's been involved? When were they involved? Why were they not involved?
Yeah.
Now, then when people behave contrary to what you've collectively agreed, that's what you can hold them to.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough courage to manage those people out, Jesse. We are, I guess, fearful of the consequence of losing people who don't behave in line with our culture. And yet these are the people that are holding us back.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And we have specific policies to deal with all that, but we just lack the courage because it's too hard, because we think about litigation and all of those things. However, if we've taken the time to co-create the culture and we've all agreed, it becomes relatively easy and straightforward.
Yeah, and I think moving on to that as well is when you've got someone who doesn't adhere to those accepted or agreed standards of behavior or whatever it is, one of the things that I've observed that creates a lack of courage and wanting to move them on is because people worry about losing the skill set, even though this person is clearly, from a cultural perspective, a square peg in a round hole, or they're not living up to what we've agreed to. They're worried about losing the skill set, and that means they tolerate stuff that they ought not to. They walk past things and turn a blind eye, and ultimately it erodes the very thing that they tried to create in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. I was a head of a big government department in New Zealand back in the day, and we had one person who, when I first started, who didn't want to do everything that everyone else was doing.
Yeah.
And that one person created what we call toxic cultures.
Yeah.
Jesse. And I went to HR and I said, listen, we've reset the culture. We've done all of this stuff. And I used to do this on my own.
Yep.
I was like, I need to performance manage this individual. And they were like, oh, it's really hard, particularly as a public servant. I was like, listen, I'm in for it. Anyway, long story short, it took me 4 months to manage this guy out. He didn't want to change, right?
Wow.
His behavior was appalling. But all the time I was fearful of losing his skill set because he was what I would call a brilliant jerk.
Yeah.
And previous managers have been tolerant of this brilliant jerk. When I got rid of the brilliant jerk, productivity went through the roof. All of a sudden, everyone mucked in.
Yeah. Everyone
was like, right, I'll pick that up. I'll learn that skill set. And it taught me a huge lesson. And this was kind of about 2010, 11, something like that. It taught me a huge lesson. I was like, you're only as good as the behavior you walk past.
Yeah.
So people started to view me as that person as well. And once I got rid of that, everyone was like, okay, it's different. It feels good. Let's get on with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you run the risk of losing other good people by tolerating the brilliant jerk. And people go, hey, he's not really that serious about the culture. He talks the talk, but, you know.
Absolutely right. And we get these, what we call high attrition rates, where people leave because they don't like the culture. Either you don't like the person you're working for, or you don't like the environment that you're working within. It's one of the two.
Yeah.
Very rarely is it for more money. We're quite happy to sit and take the incremental improvements when we're working in a great culture, because we know that it's so hard to get anywhere else.
Yeah. Totally. Speaking of great culture, let's assume we've gone through this process and we've created a good culture. This is going to sound like a weird question, but how do you know you've got a great culture? How do you know you've actually landed on something good? Is it, to use that wonderful film, the Australian film, The Castle, is it all about the vibe you're on? Or is it more than that? Obviously, we're going to see productivity and so on, but what are the markers that you would say, okay, we're on track?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different things. You see people smiling for a start. That's the immediate one, Jesse. So this is a question I get asked a lot, is how do you know? When you walk into the office and somebody says, or the surgery or the practice or whatever, and someone says good morning to you and they got a smile on the face, you know you got something good. It's not forced.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you're going through the motions. You do keep good staff. You get lots of recommendations. It just feels great to go to work.
Yeah.
It just feels great to go to work because you know that people are going to challenge you, and we all do our best work on the edge of uncomfortable. So people are often making decisions because they feel empowered to do so. You don't have to tell people they're empowered. They automatically do it. And you, as yourself, you want to stay relevant, and you're constantly pushing each other. You're looking at what else is happening in the world of dental practice. Say, what are they doing over here? What are they doing? What's the latest technology? So you're constantly pushing yourselves. So it always feels fresh. It always feels exciting. But generally, you keep your good people and they're happy.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. And of course, when you keep your good people, many good things happen as well. Patients stay longer, productivity increases, and so on and so forth. So, Colin, we've had a fairly good conversation about culture so far, but I do want to talk a little bit about performance. I mentioned to you a moment ago the performance culture matrix that we use, and getting a great culture is obviously fundamental and great, but equally we still need to have levels of performance so that people are hitting their milestones, doing the job that they need to be doing and getting the stuff done. And one of the common frustrations that I hear all the time is I've got some procedures, I've got some standard operating processes, whatever it is, I've got my systems in place. Why won't people just follow them? Do you hear that?
Yeah, mate, all the time. Hey, I was a public servant for 8 years. I heard it on a daily basis. Well, firstly, you've got to ask yourself, are the processes good enough? I think often, particularly for small business owners, like, oh, why don't people follow my process? Usually it's because they're rubbish.
Yeah.
So you've got to ask yourself, are they simple? Are they fit for purpose? And this is where you would give your people the opportunity to challenge them. I talk a lot about innovation, and innovation isn't trying to create the next Uber. Innovation is looking at those small incremental changes you can make to the everyday. And so that's the first thing that I would do, is look for little things within your process. Secondly, if people are working counter to the culture, because processes are a big part of your culture, we need to do things in a particular way. Obviously, for your listeners, safety, cleanliness, things like that are a very, very important part of the way we do things. And if people don't want to do them, then they should be encouraged to find work elsewhere, frankly.
Yeah.
We need to set metrics, and then people need to stick to them. Often, particularly in the public service, we relied a lot on form filling. And so if people didn't fill in a particular form, there used to be this constant chasing of people. And I'm like, why are we doing it? Filling in that particular document is their job. If they don't do that, then it's a performance management question, not a kind of compliance question. And so I used to performance manage people and used to say, listen, we've got a process to follow. The process is, if you don't do your job, and this is a big part of doing your job, then we're going to have a conversation. And the third conversation you definitely don't want to have, because I'm going to give you a letter. And I only ever had to have 2 conversations. Very rarely do I have to have the third conversation. People realize that actually there is a process to follow. But I think for business owners, you've got to set expectation really, really well.
Yeah.
And you've got to say, look, this is the way that we do things here. The culture is yours, you're part of it, but we need to do these things in this way. And this is why. So we have to explain the value of it.
Yeah.
Why do we have to do it in that way? And then if people don't want to do it, we have to hold them to it.
So do you have a view around metrics and accountability and frequency of measurement and all those sorts of things? Because one of the things that we do in our business is we have scorecards, and really candidly, some people embrace measurement more readily than others. Others are a little reluctant to be measured. And maybe that's coming back to some of the culture things where we need to instill that and ingrain that a bit more. But do you find that measurement is an easy thing to implement, or a little more challenging, or does it go further upstream back to the culture?
I mean, it's a big part of culture, and I cover it in the book. I talk about performance management. I talk about goal setting. I think where you can agree team goals as opposed to individual goals, that's better. Jesse, I think that, because then it becomes the sum of the whole. Everyone's got a job to do, and everyone, as I mentioned before, has got to put in a shift to achieve those goals. But I think the biggest problem that I've seen with regards to goal setting is the infrequency of measurement. So it's one of those rare occasions when more is less.
Yeah.
What we don't want to do is get 6 months in and then provide feedback because it's already too late.
Yeah.
We want to be reviewing these things on a monthly basis and then providing feedback and talking about the behaviors. So where someone's hit a target, and for parents out there, we know that one of the things that we do with our children is we always praise the behavior, not the skill, because we want to see more of the behavior. And the same is true in the corporate environment, is where someone's hit a target, we want to praise the behavior that got them to the target, but we can't afford to leave it for too long. So I think feedback and performance measurement has to be more regular. I think monthly is best because you can provide immediate feedback and then immediate insight in what someone needs to do or support in order to hit that target.
Yeah. And I guess when you've got team goals as well, where you've got a situation where you've got more than one person responsible for the outcome.
Yep.
And of course, everyone's going to have their own individual behaviors that lead to the team goal. Again, do you debrief that collectively or do you debrief that individually?
Oh, collectively.
Yeah.
Some of the targets we used to get set, I used to sit the team down and say, this is what we collectively have got to do. And then what happens culturally, Jesse, is that everybody pushes everybody else. So it's not about me as the manager anymore. It's about our collective goal and everyone's got to do a job. And if someone's not doing their bit, it's the team that motivate that other individual.
Yeah.
Now, where I see that Colin's not doing this job, then I'm going to call Colin to task.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it in that room full of people.
No.
Even if it's 3 or 4, I'm going to do it separately and go, hey, listen, we've got this target. I notice you're not pulling your weight. Now, what help can I give you in order to lift your performance? So that's, you've always got to lead with empathy with these things. But where you make it the team goal, it's the team. And sports teams are great for this. And you see the captain, center of the pitch, usually is the one motivating everyone else. Hey, we've got to win this game to do this. And Ian Morgan was a great example in the recent Cricket World Cup. Is he led from the front? It was a collective team goal, but he led from the front. And you didn't need the manager who was sat in the stands because he was watching and letting the captain do the thing on the pitch.
Yeah, totally. So, Colin, one of the challenges that occurs oftentimes when you talk to dental practice owners is they go to recruit someone and they look amazing on paper, but the reality is when they come into the practice, there's a disconnect. And again, this is going to sound a little bit harsh, but what some people say is they felt that they paid for a Rolls Royce and they got a clapped out Fiat. Now, I guess the question is, how do we try and prevent that in the first place with better interview processes? And secondly, if we somehow let something slip through the net, how do we then deal with it after the fact? I'm curious if you've got any thoughts around that.
Yeah, and it's a common problem that people have. And I think where organizations haven't taken the time to define their culture, Jesse, they lose a crucial piece of information that they need. Now, for me, I always used to say your skills will get you an interview, but it's your personality and your values that will get you the job. So what you might want to do in the interview is ask 1 or 2 questions to verify that the person can do the things that they say that they would do. But mostly the questions need to line up with, well, if you've done the work on your culture to define the values that you're looking for in a human, do they match up with this individual? Because where the values match, you're going to get a committed person who knows their role as part of the culture. That's crucially important. The second thing that I would always do is we always had a 3-month probationary period. And I was very, very upfront about this. I said, listen, within the 3 months, what you've got to demonstrate is that you can not only do all the things that you said that you would do, but you can behave in the way that the culture expects. A lot of organizations, businesses talk about, we're hiring for culture fit. It's like, well, how are you going to do that if you've never defined your culture? Also, how do you then hold them to the culture? Now, a lot of people, sometimes they just want someone with a pulse. Someone who looks good on paper that's kind of alive and breathing because things are so busy. And so what they do is they do the fast and cheap thing by let's just get someone in and we'll deal with it as we go. And then they don't provide the feedback. Whereas you have to play the longer game, really, because anybody that you bring in that runs counter to the culture that you've got really will undermine what you've created and possibly undermine the goals that you've set too.
Yeah. So coming back to a point you made earlier, and this is a question I get asked all the time, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it, is I know that I've got to hire for culture fit. How do I determine whether they're going to be a fit for culture during the interview? What sort of questions typically do you ask? Are they scenario-based questions, behavioral type questions? What sort of things are you asking in that interview for you to get a bit of an inkling to know, actually, this person is a good culture fit, or actually, no, this person is going to be a problem?
They're all of the above. And the interviews are hugely stressful, situations. So what we need is for people to have lots of empathy in those scenarios and realize that people often don't perform well in those kind of scenarios. Yeah. So it's a range of different, firstly, it's about making someone feel comfortable, but it's a range of different questions. I think too often what organizations do is they try to go for standard, Jesse, but no human being is standard.
No.
So if you approach, what you need is a kind of skeleton question. So things that I would ask, if you've got a value of integrity, I'd be asking a question, what does integrity mean to you? What does it mean to you? How does it play out in your roles? How have you demonstrated courage in previous roles? Because courage is one of our behaviors. How have you demonstrated courage? Our vision is to be the #1 dental practice in Carlton North. How can you contribute to helping us achieve that? So what you're doing is you're kind of putting people slightly outside their comfort zone, but you're asking very culture-specific questions.
Yeah.
Rather than tell me about a time when you served the customer and things were running late. Well, you're just going to find out a standard answer. And you don't really want that.
Yeah. Ladies and gents, if you've just tuned in, I'm going to encourage you to go back and just listen to that last 30 seconds again and again and again, because Colin has shared some absolute pro tips there about how to recruit for culture. And not only has Colin shared some pro tips in the last 30 seconds, he's shared a heap of gold in the last 37 or so minutes that we've been talking. If you haven't listened all the way through it, I'm going to encourage you to head across to Colin's website, colindellis.com, and he's got a book coming out in November, and it's called Culture Fix, How to Create a Great Place to Work. This is going to be a must-read. I think we're going to put it on our reading list, and I'm going to suggest that everyone just bookmarks November and grabs a copy. Colin, you've been really generous with your time today, mate, and I firstly want to say thank you. It means a great deal to all of us here at Savvy Dentist that you've taken the time out of your day to come and share some great stuff with us. As we wrap up, I guess I'd like to just wonder if there's any little pieces of wisdom, the gospel according to Colin, if you will, when it comes to getting this stuff right. Are there any little things, hints, tips, thoughts, little vignettes you'd leave the audience with so they can ponder that as they go about their day?
I guess the last thing to leave you with, Jesse, is, and particularly for those people listening, is when you're the best human being you can be, it's infectious. And other people, it encourages people to do likewise. And so I always say to people, if there's one thing that you can do is to take a look at yourself, understand who you are, what you're about, get to know your emotions really well, manage them really well, and then collectively come together and talk about what it is that you need to co-create in order to be successful now and in the future.
Oh, mate, that's gold. That is absolutely gold. Again, mate, I really want to say thank you, Colin. You've been tremendous as a guest today in terms of your knowledge, your wisdom, and your generosity. And from all of us here, mate, great big thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. It's been great to be on.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.